She slipped in the mud and hit the ground hard, the tin bucket clanging across the porch, while the men on the steps watched and did nothing. So why did the one rider who stopped refuse to move on when everyone else already had? Rain tapped steady on warped boards. Lillian pushed herself up, palms streaked with red clay, eyes fixed on the bucket rolling toward the hitching post. Someone laughed under their breath. She didn't look at them. She stood, slow, steady, and picked it up herself. Hoofbeats cut through the drizzle. A tall rider reined in, saying nothing. He didn't reach for her, didn't speak. Just watched the men until their voices thinned and died. Lillian wiped her hand on her skirt, chin lifted like she'd decided something already. The rider shifted in the saddle, like he meant to stay. And that was the part no one in town understood. Would you have stayed standing there? Or walked away? Stay with me. This one doesn't go the way you think. The rain had been falling for 3 straight days, steady and cold, turning the main road of Redstone Creek into a long stretch of brown sludge. Wagon wheels sank deep. Boots pulled free with a wet sound that echoed between the buildings. By noon, folks had stopped trying to keep clean. That was when she came over the ridge. No horse, no coat worth mentioning. Just a woman walking slow, one hand clutching a canvas bag, the other pressed against her side like something inside hurt to breathe. Lillian Brooks didn't make it 10 more steps. Her boot slipped. The mud gave way. She went down hard in front of Wilkes' General Store, her shoulder striking the warped wooden boards, her bag falling open just enough for a corner of folded cloth to spill out and soak. Nobody moved. A man inside the store shifted a crate with his foot so he could see better. Someone laughed under their breath. Another turned away like they hadn't noticed. Rain tapped against the tin awning above her. It ran down her hair, off her chin, and pooled beneath her cheek. After a moment, Mr. Wilkes stepped out, not in a hurry. He looked down at her like she was something left in the road. "Can't have you blocking the door," he muttered. He didn't offer a hand, just took her by the arm, dragged her enough to clear the entrance, and let her slump against the wall under the awning. Inside, the bell over the door rang again. Business went on. It took her a long while to wake. When she did, she didn't speak. Just blinked slow, eyes adjusting, like she had to remember where she was before she could move. A woman passing by pulled her child closer, guiding him wide around Lillian without breaking stride. Lillian pushed herself up inch by inch. Her hands were shaking, but she kept them low, hidden in the folds of her skirt. There was a thin gold band pressed into her palm, tarnished, nearly dull. She closed her fingers around it before anyone could see. By evening, someone told her about work. Not kindness, just direction. Mrs. Dalrymple's boarding house needed hands, always did. Lillian followed the instructions without asking questions, her boots leaving shallow prints that filled with water as soon as she lifted them. The boarding house leaned slightly to one side, like it had given up fighting the years. Inside smelled like boiled cabbage and coal smoke. Mrs. Dalrymple didn't offer a chair. "You eat what's left," she said. "Sleep by the stove. Work starts before sunup." Lillian nodded once. That night, she lay on a thin blanket near the kitchen wall, the heat from the dying coals fading inch by inch. The sounds of the house creaked above her, floorboards, footsteps, voices she wasn't part of. She turned onto her side, pressing her back against the wall. Her hand stayed closed, even in sleep. Upstairs, someone whispered. She showed up out of nowhere. "I heard her husband didn't die right. Trouble follows people like that." The voices faded into the wood and the dark. Down by the stove, Lillian didn't move, but her grip tightened just a little, around the ring no one had taken from her yet. Morning came early in Mrs. Dalrymple's kitchen. Before the sun cleared the ridge, Lillian was already at the basin, sleeves rolled, hands in cold water that smelled faintly of lye. The window above the sink was fogged, but she could still make out the shape of the street. Mud drying in uneven patches, wagon tracks hardened like scars. She worked without speaking, carried coal, scrubbed pans, swept the same corner twice when no one was looking. By midday, the kitchen was warm, but her fingers stayed stiff. Mrs. Dalrymple handed her a basket without looking up. "Linens to the back rooms, and don't be slow about it." Lillian nodded and stepped outside. The air had turned sharp. The mud had thickened again where the sun hadn't reached. She kept her eyes low, watching her steps, moving steady through the narrow stretch between the saloon and the feed store. That was when she heard him. "Well now," a voice said behind her, thick and easy. "Looks like the storm left something behind." Lillian didn't turn. She kept walking. Bootsteps followed. "Hey," the man said, closer now. "I'm talking to you." A hand brushed the edge of her basket. Not grabbing. Not yet. She stopped, turned just enough to face him. Jed Mercer stood there, hat tipped back, a half smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. He smelled like whiskey and long hours in the sun. "You don't say much, do you?" he went on. "People notice that." "I have work to finish," Lillian said. Her voice came out even, dry. Jed stepped closer. "Work can wait." He nudged the basket again, harder this time. The folded sheets shifted. A couple of men leaned against the saloon wall nearby, watching. No one spoke. Lillian adjusted her grip. "I said," she repeated, "I have work." Jed laughed under his breath. "Yeah," he said. "I heard you." Then he shoved her. It wasn't enough to send her flying. Just enough. Her foot slid. The ground gave. The basket tipped from her hands, linens spilling into the mud. She went down on one knee. The street went quiet for a second, just long enough for the sound of fabric hitting dirt to carry. Jed looked down at her. "Mom, that's better," he said. "Fits the picture." No one moved. Lillian didn't look up right away. She reached for the sheets, one by one, shaking off what she could. Mud clung anyway. Her hands were steady. Jed shifted his weight, like he might say something else. That was when the horse stopped. The sound came first, hooves slowing, leather creaking, the quiet snort of an animal that knew its place. Then silence. Jed glanced over his shoulder. So did the others. The rider didn't rush. He sat tall in the saddle, broad across the shoulders, his coat dark with road dust. The brim of his hat cast a shadow that kept his eyes hidden at first. He looked at the scene, at the basket, at the mud, at the man standing over a woman who hadn't raised her voice once. Then he swung down from the horse. No hurry. Boots hit the ground with a dull, solid sound. Lillian noticed that. The weight of it. He walked past Jed without a word, bent down, picked up one of the sheets, shook it out once, slow, careful, not clean but better. Then he gathered the rest, stacked them one on top of the other like they still mattered. When he held the basket out, he didn't touch her, just waited. Lillian looked at his hand, then at the basket. Then she took it. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. The man nodded once. That was all. Then he turned his head, looked at Jed, didn't speak, didn't step closer. Just looked. Jed shifted again. His grin faded a fraction. "What?" he muttered. "You got something to say?" The man didn't answer. The silence stretched. Something in it changed the air. Jed let out a breath through his nose, gave a short laugh that didn't sound sure anymore. Yeah, he said. Didn't think so. He stepped back. Then another step. Turned away like he had somewhere else to be. The men by the saloon drifted apart. The street found its noise again. The rider picked up his reins, mounted without a glance back, and rode on. Lillian stood there a moment longer. The basket felt heavier now. She turned and walked back toward the boarding house. Didn't look behind her. That evening, after the supper plates were cleared and the last pot set to dry, Mrs. Dalrymple waved her toward the back door. Someone asking for you. Lillian wiped her hands on her apron, stepped outside. The sky had gone low and gray again, clouds stacking over the hills. He stood by the fence. Same coat, same hat. Up close, he looked older than she expected. Lines at the corners of his mouth, a scar near his jaw, pale against sun-worn skin. He didn't step closer, kept a full pace between them. Miss Brooks, he said. She didn't remember telling him her name. I didn't give it, she replied. No, he said. You didn't. A pause. The wind moved through the yard, rattling the loose boards. I own Stone Ridge, he went on. 3 hours west. Dry land. Needs tending. Lillian said nothing. I need someone there, he said. Legally. On paper. She watched him now. You're asking for a worker, she said. No. Another pause. I'm asking for a wife. The word settled between them. Flat. Without weight. Not for anything else, miss, he added. You'd have your own room, your own say, work, food, safety. That's it. Lillian didn't answer right away. From inside, a chair scraped across the floor. Someone laughed. The sound didn't reach her. Why me? She asked finally. He shook his head once. Doesn't matter why, he said. What matters is this. He looked past her toward the road, then back again. If you stay here, he said, voice steady, you won't make it through winter. The wind picked up, colder now. Lillian held the basket tighter against her side. Didn't look away. Not this time. Think on it, he said. He stepped back, gave her the space she hadn't asked for but didn't refuse. I'll be here tomorrow, he added, before noon. Then he turned, walked to his horse, and rode out the same way he'd come. Lillian stood by the fence until the sound faded. Behind her, the door creaked open. Who was that? Mrs. Dalrymple called. Lillian didn't turn. She looked down at her hands, at the faint outline of the ring pressing through her skin. Then she closed her fingers again. Slow, like she was holding something that might still decide her future. She didn't answer. Not yet. The next morning came thin and pale, the kind of light that didn't warm anything it touched. Lillian stood by the back door before the kitchen woke. Her bag was already packed. It hadn't taken long. A spare dress. A comb with 2 missing teeth. The ring. Mrs. Dalrymple didn't ask where she was going. Just looked once, sharp and quick, then turned back to the stove. Leave the apron, she said. Lillian untied it, folded it, set it on the table like it still belonged to someone else. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, she was standing outside the boarding house, the mud stiff beneath her boots. He was already there. Gideon Hale sat on his horse, still as the fence post beside him. He tipped his head once when he saw her, not surprised. You're early, he said. So are you. That was enough. He didn't ask if she was sure. Didn't offer a hand as she climbed into the wagon behind him. Just checked the harness, turned the team west, and started down the road. Redstone Creek fell away without ceremony. No one waved. No one noticed. The land changed slow at first. Mud gave way to dry patches, then to hard ground scattered with stone. By midday, The air felt different, thinner, cleaner. They rode mostly in silence. Once he handed her a tin cup without looking back. Water. Warm from the sun, but clean. "Another hour," he said later. She nodded, though he couldn't see it. When they crested the ridge, the ranch came into view. Stone Ridge sat low in a wide valley, tucked between red cliffs that rose like walls on either side. A long house, weathered but standing straight. A barn set off to the right. Fencing stretched in uneven lines, holding back more land than it looked like. It wasn't pretty, but it was quiet. They rolled down into it slow, wheels crunching over gravel. 3 figures stood near the house. One older man, arms folded. Another, younger, shifting his weight from foot to foot. A third place near the door stood empty, like someone had been there once and wasn't anymore. Gideon climbed down first. "Zeke," he said, nodding to the older man. "Tommy." The older man tipped his chin. "Boss." Tommy didn't speak, just glanced at Lillian, then away. "This is Lillian," Gideon said. "She'll be staying." He didn't explain more. Didn't need to. Zeke looked at her a long moment. Not unkind, just measuring. "Ma'am," he said finally. Lillian nodded back. Tommy muttered something close to the same, still not meeting her eyes. Gideon turned to the wagon. "Help unload," he said. The men moved. Lillian stepped down on her own. The ground felt different under her boots, firmer, like it would hold. Inside, the house was clean enough to live in, but not cared for. Dust gathered in the corners. The table sat off-center, one leg uneven. A pan rested on the stove, wiped but not scrubbed. Gideon set her bag near the stairs. "Room's up there," he said. "First door on the right." She climbed the steps. The room was small. A bed, a chair, a window that looked out over the fence line. The latch on the door was simple, iron-worn smooth. She tested it. It locked from the inside. That mattered. That night, she didn't sleep much. The house creaked in the wind. A board shifted somewhere below. Voices drifted up once and then faded. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling. Her hand rested on her chest. Closed. Morning came with the smell of coffee. Lillian was downstairs before the others finished their first cup. She didn't ask where anything was, just looked. Flour in one bin, beans in another, salt near the stove. The coffee pot burned at the edges where it had been left too long over heat. She took it off, started fresh. By the time the men sat down, the table was different. Centered. Clean. 4 cups instead of 3. Zeke noticed first. His eyes flicked from the table to her, then back again. Tommy sat slow, like he wasn't sure where to put his hands. Gideon took his seat last. He lifted the cup, took a sip, set it down. "It's better," he said. Nothing more. They ate in silence, but it wasn't the same silence as before. That afternoon, she moved the table closer to the window, wiped down the shelves, set things where they could be reached without thinking. No one told her to. No one stopped her. That evening, as the light faded behind the cliffs, she found Gideon outside, fixing a loose board along the porch. She stood a few steps away. He didn't turn. "You don't ask questions," she said. He hammered once more before answering. "Not unless I need to." She looked out over the land. "You don't want to know what I did before I got here?" The hammer stilled. He set it down, turned, just enough to face her. The wind moved between them, carrying dust and the smell of dry grass. "I need to know what you'll do from here," he said. "That's all." She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded. Something shifted, small, but real. That night, when she closed her door, she didn't check the latch twice, just once. And for the first time since the rain, she slept without waking at every sound. It didn't last. The first sign came before dawn, when the wind carried something sharp through the open crack of the window. Not rain, not dust. Smoke. Lillian sat up. The room was still dark, but the smell lingered, faint, like something had burned and been put out in a hurry. She pulled on her boots and stepped into the hall. Downstairs, Gideon was already at the door. He didn't ask why she was awake. "Stay inside," he said. She didn't answer. He stepped out anyway. By the time she reached the porch, Zeke and Tommy were already moving along the fence line. A section near the lower pasture hung loose, wire cut clean through. Beyond it, one of the cattle lay still, untouched except for the mark left behind. Not hunger. A message. Gideon crouched near the post, running his fingers along the cut wire. "Clean blade," Zeke said. Gideon nodded once. No more words. That afternoon, no one mentioned it at the table, but the silence had changed again. Thicker now. That was when the rider came. He didn't rush the approach, came straight down the main path like he belonged there, dust trailing behind him in a slow line. Lillian saw him first from the window, set her cup down without a sound. Gideon followed her gaze. His jaw tightened, just enough. The man dismounted without being asked. Harland Crow. His coat was too clean for ranch work, his boots polished. A man who spent more time behind desks than fences, but knew exactly where to stand to be seen. "Mr. Hale," he said, tipping his hat just enough to pass for polite. "Didn't expect to find you entertaining guests." His eyes moved to Lillian, paused, stayed there. "Mrs. Brooks," he added. Lillian didn't correct him. "Your business?" Gideon asked. Harlan smiled thin. "Collecting," he said. "Same as always." He reached into his coat, pulled out folded papers, tapped them lightly against his palm. "Outstanding debt," he went on, "signed and witnessed, still valid." Lillian stepped forward. "You've been paid," she said. "Partially," Harland replied. "And then your husband passed. Unfortunate timing." He glanced around the yard. "Leaves things unsettled." Gideon didn't take the papers, didn't look at them. "Not here," he said. Harlan shrugged. "Then in town," he said. "But she comes with me." Lillian's hand tightened at her side. Tommy shifted near the fence. Zeke stayed still. "You don't get to take anything from here," Gideon said. His voice stayed level. That mattered more than if he'd raised it. Harlan studied him a moment longer, then smiled again. "Of course," he said. "No need to rush." He folded the papers back into his coat. "I'll return," he added. "With witnesses, if needed." His eyes flicked once more to Lillian. "Best you remember what's owed." Then he mounted and rode out the same way he came. The dust settled slow behind him. No one moved until it was gone. That night, the wind picked up again. Lillian stood by the door, rifle in her hands. Not raised, not yet. Zeke stood beside her. "You ever fired one before?" he asked. She nodded. "Enough." He didn't ask more. Behind them, Tommy paced once, then stopped. Gideon stood a few steps back. He didn't give orders, didn't tell her to put the rifle down. That mattered too. Hooves came again just after midnight. More than one this time. They stopped at the edge of the yard. Didn't come closer. A voice carried through the dark. "Just business," Harlan called. "Nothing more." Lillian stepped forward. The rifle came up. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. She fired. The shot cracked through the valley, echoing off the cliffs. It didn't hit anyone, didn't need to. The horses shifted. One reared back. Silence followed. Then movement. The riders turned, pulled away. Gone. The night settled again. Lillian lowered the rifle. Her hands shook now, not before. Gideon stepped up beside her. Close enough to be there, not close enough to touch. "You didn't miss," he said. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "I wasn't trying to hit them." "I know." Tommy watched her from the porch. Different now. Zeke nodded once. Inside, the lamp burned low. Later, when the house quieted again, Gideon found her at the table. The papers Harland had carried sat there now. She must have taken them when he left. Spread out, flattened, numbers, signatures, dates. "You ran this before," Gideon said. Not a question. Lillian didn't look up. "My husband did," she said. On paper. Her finger traced a line across the page. Supplies, livestock, contracts. She tapped one section. "This is where he lied." Gideon stepped closer. Not too close. "You caught it," he said. She nodded. "He said it was nothing," she replied. "Said I didn't understand how things worked." Her hand stilled. "But I did." She looked up then, met his eyes. "And when I pushed, they pushed back harder." The wind rattled the window. Gideon didn't speak. Didn't need to. The truth settled between them. Not heavy, just clear. Lillian gathered the papers, stacked them neat. "They'll come again," she said. "Yes," she nodded once, then folded the papers and set them aside. "I won't run." Gideon held her gaze a moment longer. "I didn't ask you to." That was all. Outside, the fence still hung loose. Inside, something had already been repaired. Morning came slow, pale light stretching across the valley like it wasn't sure it belonged there. Lillian stood at the table with the papers in front of her. Not spread out this time. Stacked. Tied with a thin strip of cloth she'd torn from the lining of her bag. Gideon leaned against the doorframe, arms loose at his sides. "You going into town?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Zeke glanced up from his cup, but said nothing. Tommy looked between them, then back down at his plate. Gideon pushed off the frame. "I'll ride with you." Lillian shook her head. "No." A pause. "It's my name on those papers," she added. "My business to finish." Gideon studied her. Didn't argue. Just nodded once. "Take the gray mare," he said. "She's steady on the ridge road." Lillian gathered the papers, slipped them into her bag. Before she turned, she reached for the hook by the door. Her coat hung there now. Not the one she came with. This one fit. She pulled it on without thinking. The ride into Redstone Creek felt shorter. Or maybe she didn't notice the distance the same way. The road had dried in places, hardened where wheels had carved deep enough to hold shape. The buildings came into view one by one, just as they had before. Nothing had changed. Except her. She tied the mare outside the town hall, didn't look toward the boarding house. Inside, the room smelled of ink and old wood. 3 men sat behind a long table, ledger books stacked beside them. A clerk stood off to the side, pen already in hand. Harland Crow stood near the window. He smiled when he saw her. "Mrs. Brooks," he said. "I was beginning to think you'd—" She set the papers down. The sound cut through the room. Flat. Final. Harland's smile faltered, just a little. "You're mistaken," she said. No raised voice. No rush. She untied the cloth, opened the stack, 1 page at a time. "These shipments," she said, tapping the first line. "Recorded twice." She flipped to the next. These numbers, she continued, changed after signature. Another page. This contract, she said, sliding it forward, signed under false account. The men at the table leaned in. The clerk stopped writing. Harlan's jaw tightened. You don't understand, he started. I do, Lillian said. She didn't look at him, didn't need to. She placed the last sheet down. All of it, she added. Silence filled the room. Not the kind that waits, the kind that decides. One of the men cleared his throat. We'll review these, he said. Another nodded. Harlan took a step forward. This isn't settled. It is, the first man cut in. Harlan stopped, looked around, saw the shift. It was small, but it was enough. He straightened his coat, forced a smile that didn't hold. This isn't over, he said quietly. Lillian met his eyes then, for the first time since he'd arrived at the ranch. It is for me. She gathered nothing, left the papers where they were, turned, walked out. The air outside felt different, clear. She untied the mare, mounted without hurry, and rode west. The sun was lower by the time she reached the ridge. Stone Ridge came into view just as it had the first day. Still quiet, still standing. Gideon was on the porch, hat in his hand, waiting. He didn't step forward when she rode up, didn't ask. She swung down, tied the reins, and walked toward him. Their eyes met. He gave a small nod. That was all. She walked past him. Inside, the table was set. 4 cups. One chair pulled out slightly, like someone expected her to sit. She set her bag down by the stairs, removed her coat, hung it on the same hook. Days passed, then weeks. No riders came. No fences were cut. Winter settled in slow, the first frost clinging to the edges of the pasture before the snow followed. One morning, Gideon stood by the door as she came in from the cold. You planning to leave? He asked. When the snow melts? Lillian set her gloves on the table, took her time. There was a nail by the wall now, newly hammered in. She lifted her coat, hung it there, smoothed it once, then turned back. I already unpacked. The fire cracked softly in the stove. Zeke shifted his chair. Tommy poured coffee into the extra cup without looking up. Gideon set his hat on the table. Not the hook. The table. It stayed there. Lillian moved to the stove, poured water into the pot, set it on the heat. Behind her, boots crossed the floor. A chair pulled out. Another. No one said anything. They didn't need to. Outside, the valley held steady under the weight of winter. Inside, the room filled with quiet movement. Work to be done. Food to be shared. A place that no longer asked questions. And for the first time in a long while, no one was leaving. Out here, nothing comes easy. Not land, not trust, not a second chance. A woman can lose everything without making a sound. A man can carry a name that keeps people at a distance before he ever speaks. And still, 2 people can choose to stand in the same doorway, day after day, until the silence between them starts to feel like something steady. Lillian didn't ask to be saved. Gideon never tried to be a hero. What they built wasn't loud. It didn't need witnesses. It showed up in small things. Wood stacked before a storm. A chair pulled out before someone sat down. A coat hung where it belonged. Sometimes, a new life doesn't begin with a promise. Sometimes, it begins when someone decides to stay, and the other one doesn't ask them to leave. If you had been in her place, carrying what she carried, would you have walked away or stayed and faced it? If this story stayed with you, there are more like it waiting. Quiet ones, hard ones, the kind that linger long after the fire burns low. You're always welcome back here.